and I am conducting an interview today of Vernon Zurick. I'm with Dana Echohawk, who is on the camera today. It's November 16, 2011, and we are doing this for the Louisville History Museum, and it's an oral history project. So Vern, it's nice to be here with you, and I'd like you to give us your entire name and also your date of birth and where you were born.
Okay, Vernon Joseph Andrew Zurick, also known as Thunder. I got the name Thunder because I used to change the weather working for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the U.S. government. I was born March 18th, 1925 in Louisville, Colorado, in a home on Lafarge Avenue.
Great, great. And anything else you want to say about that? And we'll go to your parents. And
Oh yeah, my father was Joseph Zurick. My mother was Leila Zurick. My father was born in Louisville. My mother was born in Casaleggio, Provincia di Navarro, Torino, Italy, near Milan. She came over to the United States when she was 40 days old.
you had practiced that.
Well,
Saying the whole.
I was there. I saw Casaleggio in Italy.
Is it a small?
It's a little tiny
small
farming community, that's right,
That's wonderful.
close to Milan.
And where'd your father come from?
We came from Czechoslovakia. Well, my father was born in Louisville, but the grandparents came from Czechoslovakia, as far as I know. Yeah.
So both the Zurich and Biola families have been in Louisville since the late 1800s and the early 1900s.
That is right, yes.
Goes back. Well, tell us about your grandparents then.
Well, okay. My grandfather was a miner and a farmer. That is John Zurick. And he even lived out here in Tacona for a while. And I remember coming out to Tacona as a little kid. And we came out one time to visit him with my Aunt Ann and my mother. And we had a flat tire right by the Erie Airport. I remember that.
Wasn't the Erie Airport at the time?
No, it wasn't the airport there at all. But it was right by that area. That's correct. I remember that as a little kid. Yeah.
So, and you remember your grandmother as well?
No, I do not. No, but I remember the day she passed away, and my father came home with the news, and I remember the tears and him crying because his mother had passed away. That was in the home on Lafarge Avenue. I remember that as a little kid. In fact, I remember my first Christmas there in that home, and some of the gifts that I even got at that time. So.
And that, I think, was the address 718, perhaps, Lafarge.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Third house, going north on the right,
Okay.
beyond South Street.
So you had Zurichs and Bielas both living on that street.
I think so, as far as I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And your mother had several sisters?
Yes, so we had, my mother had a sister, Josephine, and she was born in Louisville, and Inez, and she was born in Louisville. It's interesting because my grandfather, being Italian, thought that his daughters would marry Italians.
Did they?
But no, my mother married a Czechoslovakian, and Josie married an Englishman, Tom Stevens, and Inez married a Polish man, John Poprocki.
Were there a lot of Czechs and
Oh yes,
Polish in Louisville?
oh yeah, there was even a Czechoslovakian lodge that met at the St. Louis School, and they lived on the west side of Louisville. That was where all the Czechs and people from Middle Europe lived.
But your street on Lafarge had sort of a mixture because you had
Oh yeah,
Italians and-
yeah, it was the second generation already of people that came over, That is correct, yeah.
Do you, some of the Zurichs then lived at 745 Lafarge? Is that-
I don't know about that. No, I can't answer that.
But there were a mixture of the two families along that
Apparently so.
street.
Yeah, apparently from historical records.
Did you grow up on that street or?
No, we moved up to 1000 Grant Avenue, catty-corner from St. Louis School. That's where I went to school, all 8 grades, starting at kindergarten. Went through the 8th grade. We had three classes in one room. We had 3 rooms, and then we went through the entire time. And I remember one of the teachers, Sister Cirilla, and she was a toughie.
You had to stay in line.
Oh, I'll tell you, we stayed in line.
On the Grant Street house at 1000 Grant was right on the corner then?
That's right,
Grant
yes.
and
Yeah,
South?
sure.
That was a family home originally built by...
Martin Zurick built that home, and that's where he died in 1913. He was one of the 3 Zurichs that came over from Czechoslovakia, and my grandparents, with my grandparents. John Zurick, Joe Zurick, and Martin Zurick, all 3 brothers, came over from Czechoslovakia.
So after he died, then your family moved there?
Then we moved there in 1930.
So you were 5 years old?
5 years old, that's exactly right. I remember going up there.
Yeah.
When we moved there, over there, it was interesting because all the neighbors in the area said, "Oh, that mean Zurick kid is going to be living here."
Oh, I'll bet, yeah. Couldn't have been too bad at 5 years old. So did you play a lot with your cousins, and you seem to have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins around you?
No, we didn't seem to do that. It was mostly the other boys that lived in the area and girls. Joe Ross lived a block away. Buddy Robinson lived a block away. Helen Berardi, who married Long Jack Crancy, who was our mayor, graduated with Long Jack. He became our mayor twice. Rita Rezai lived right next door, and she had those children that became champion wrestlers. So those were the people that mostly we associated with in that area.
Was it your grandfather that married a Tomeo after your grandmother died?
That's right. My grandfather, Joe Biella, his wife, Marietta, passed away, and that was my mother's mother. And her grandmother passed away also within a week of that time. But later then, Joe Biella, my grandfather, married Michelina Tomeo.
And the Tomeos had lived in that same area as well?
Apparently so, yes. Yeah.
The Tomeo house now is part of the museum.
I think that's right, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So what about your growing up years then? You were on Grant Street, you went to St. Louis.
Yes, that's right. And I remember there we used to chop wood over at the priest's house, Father Benedict's house, and for the stove we had big pot-bellied stoves, and we'd gather around those stoves to warm up in the wintertime, and it was really cold at that time. And then it was kind of interesting too. During the summer, they had the school boys digging the basement out from under St. Louis School. And Frank Hader brought his horse or tractor and pulled the dirt out from under there as we dug it out. They thought, well, these
hours, or?
No, it was in the summer, and they figured, well, these are coal miners' sons. They know how to dig the basement, so we did that. But I coughed up dust for quite a long time after that, so that was quite an experience.
You didn't go into any coal veins or anything like that?
Oh, no, we weren't that deep at all, so, right, no.
But that was just part of your going to school there?
That's right. And I really remember, too, on January 20th, 1936, I woke up and heard the little Italian ladies really chattering outside. There was an explosion at the Monarch Mine, and that's where my Uncle Tom was at that particular time, married to my Aunt Josephine, my mother's sister. And we went to school, and we're all around the pot-bellied stove and talking about that explosion. And really, even all the kids there were worried about it at that particular time.
Had parents or
no,
people that
not too many there, but the DeSantises were the other children whose father was killed in that accident.
So Tom was killed.
He was killed, that's right, yeah. It took a long time before they found a lot of those men. And I remember my father coming home after searching for days for Tom, and again, tears were going down his face, and my mother said, "Did they find Tom?" And he just nodded his head, yes. And it was bad news.
There were various family members that were hurt or died from coal mine accidents in your background.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
I think Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph,
One
one of the brothers of my grandfather was killed in an accident. And then his son, Florian, just to show you how they treated the coal miners, was injured in the mine, and he walked home. And then 2 days later, he passed away. So they didn't really treat the men who were injured very well at that particular time.
Did Martin Zurick, the one that built the house on Grant Street, he started the phone company?
That's right. And
Louisville?
in about 1906, he started the phone company in Louisville, and his son Martin kept it going. So the father's name was Martin, and then there was Martin Jr.
Okay. And you had relatives that worked at the phone company, or you never did, I presume?
No. Well, my Aunt Josephine, years later, after her husband Tom was killed in the Monarch Mine accident, worked for the phone company in Louisville. And then she had charge of the phone company in Milliken, Colorado, and then she went to Berthoud, where she had charge of the phone company there. And her son was Donald, her only child. She never married again after that accident.
So did he come back and live in Louisville, or did she come back?
No, she stayed in Berthoud, and Donald stayed out in that area also. And married a girl from Milliken, and they had 3 sons, finally.
Some of your family had a store on Main Street?
Yeah, Joe Biella had general merchandise there at, what was the address, 927 Main Street, just a few blocks, 3 houses south of the museum.
Oh, okay.
He had his general store right there, and he lived right there, and that's where he passed away.
Do you remember what the name of it was?
Joe Biella General Merchandise,
Okay.
or Joe Biella Groceries. I don't know exactly what it was. Yeah.
Did other family members work there?
Well, I probably so, because I remember going in the store after they had closed it down, and they still had some of the display cases and things like that. I remember, though, sitting on the steps of that store with my tricycle when they were paving Main Street. Main Street wasn't paved, and I could smell that oil, and I thought, boy, that smells good. And it was really an experience for me to sit there and watch them to pave Main Street, right? Yeah.
Did you ever did you work in any place on Main Street?
No. So, no, what happened to me as far as my work was concerned, I worked doing garden work for the neighbors, and we would water 5 hours every other day. I'd cut the lawn, weed, and get rid of weeds out in the street, because it wasn't paved even yet where we lived, for, get this,
How much did you make?
$1 a week.
But it went further.
Well, it did.
$1 does now.
Yeah, and then I remember somehow I got into tap dancing. I really liked tap dancing, and they had a Mickey Mouse club, and I liked to tap dance. And
Wow.
Joe Colaci was getting married to Honey Porta, and they were having the shower, and almost all the women in town were invited to the Red Men Hall. So I was on the program to tap dance, and Mike Colaci, Joe's father, gave me $3 for just a few seconds of tap dancing. I should have gotten into entertainment instead of staying with the garden
How old
work.
were you then?
Well, it was what, 30s or something like that? Maybe
So
10, 12, something like that
You
at that
were
time.
young, pretty
Yeah,
young. Well,
yeah.
How did you learn tap dancing? Who taught you?
The Mann sisters. top tap. They came over from Boulder and they recruited us to tap dance. And I remember tap dancing with some of the local girls, and one of them was Loretta Forbes, one was Jackie Blanquette, and Jackie Blanquette and I had a kind of a duo that we did. So then I danced with Louis Romano. Louis Romano was also a tap dancer. And we had a contest at the Rex Theater, and we were called the Two Smoothies. We danced in white. We had white outfits, totally white outfits. And so,
so there was at least two boys that were tap dancing?
Yeah, that's right. But then when I played football, you know, I was second in the state of Colorado in the 100-yard dash. And I only weighed 130 pounds, but the coach let me try it out for tailback. And I was fast, and if I got away, I never got clear. They couldn't catch me, but I wasn't too shifty. I said, what should I do to get shifty? And the coach said, take dancing. Well, I had done some tap dancing, so I'd do anything to play football. So I really took up tap dancing again. And you can't guess what happened.
What?
I became a heck of a tap dancer. I didn't do a thing for my football.
I see. But you love dancing.
Yeah, so
from that time on.
yeah, so that was my dancing and ballroom dancing, and I ended up dancing as a dancer on the cruise lines as a dance host. And Loretta and I give exhibitions, and we belonged to the LGBT Shrine and a dance club and all. So we gave 20 exhibitions in 1 year.
Did you? Of course, you loved the dances, I'm sure, at high school and.
Oh yeah, we went to all those dances, all the proms and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, sure. And we had a big gymnasium right there at the middle school now. It was Louisville High School at that time. So, but we went to all the proms, and all the girls were all dressed, and we had corsages for the girls, and we walked all the way over to Lafayette, Florida to get the corsages. Ed Hester and John Franchini and myself. So I had a date. Some of the dates I had were with Viola Boyce and Patricia Farrell. They were my dates, and some of the others were a girl named DeMolin, Betty Jean DeMolin, and Geraldine Windsor were some of the other girls we knew, and Betty Jo Suplee. So, but you know, in high school, there were twice as many boys as there were girls. So we had to go to the other grades that is in the senior class. We went down to the junior class to get some of our dates.
So that, by the time you were a senior, that would have been the Second World War would have.
Yeah, it was beginning, and that was, yeah.
So were a lot of the young men starting to go in the service?
Well, what happened there was it was December 7th, 1941. I remember it well. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, came over the radio, it was a Sunday, about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. We went to school the next day, and all of us were ready to go off and fight the Japanese. But Frank Fabrizio, our principal, and Charles Bergner, our superintendent, had a convocation and said, no, don't do that. Get your education. It's important that you get your education. But some of the fellows did go off, and they joined the Marines, and some of them didn't come back. It was some of our more aggressive type of fellows that really had to go, and some of them didn't come back. So we stayed there and finished our education. And it was interesting, as we became seniors, the Army would come by, the Army Air Corps would come by with their programs. And you can sign up for weather. You can go to a school and learn about weather. You can get in the Army Air Corps. The Navy came by with V-12 programs for the kids to go to college. Some of them did. John Mayhofer went to Colorado U, stayed right at Colorado U, and got an engineering degree doing the V-12 program. Dominic Ferrari went to the V-12 program. And then one of the fellows went back to Yale and took a special Army program. Then came the Battle of the Bulge, and guess what? He was shipped right to Europe and given a rifle right from Yale University to get there and fight at the Battle of the Bulge. Yeah. Gene Garnier was his name. Yeah.
Was this after they had graduated first and then went in?
Oh yeah, it was after he graduated on those, sure. Yeah.
Well, you were senior class president?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Yeah.
What's that, 43? Is that?
Yeah, we graduated in 1943. We played for the championship of the Class B football in 1942, and we'd won all our games till in the last one, the score was 0-0 at the half. We played Manzanola. We lost 26-0. Nobody ever knew why that ever happened. So,
All in the second half.
yeah, all in the second half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then it's also interesting. When I took the exam to do the to join the Army Air Corps, Joe Colaci, who was 26 years old at the time, was 18, said, "Yeah, I'm interested in that. Tell me about it." And so I told him about how you take the exam and tutored him on what the questions might be. And he took the exam and he passed, and he was so elated. And they said, "Well, we won't be calling you guys for a year." But by that time, he'd be 27 and too old for the program. But guess what? They called us up in 3 weeks to go to Miami Beach, Florida for basic training, Joe Colaci and I. And we were 5 days on a troop train without a change of clothes, because he said just bring a little satchel with some personal things, to Florida, to Miami Beach, Florida. And I remember we were crawling through mud with rifles and all, and Joe Colaci had mud on his face. And he looked up at the drill sergeant. He says, "This is supposed to be the Air Corps." The drill sergeant said, "This is the Army."
So what happened? Did you ever get in the Air Corps?
Well, sure. So anyhow, we were in this middle of the summer, soaking wet in Florida. I went up to the Springfield College in Massachusetts supposedly for 5 months of college. And winter now. Springfield College, that's where basketball originated, by the way. And that's where I did some flight training in a Piper Cub. But the problem was, I think I did too well on things. And instead of 5 months of college, they only gave me 3 months. And then I was off to Nashville, Tennessee for classification, for whether being a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. And I didn't even know how to drive a car at that time, so I said, "I'll be a navigator." And I became.
And they gave you the choice?
Oh yeah. So anyway, after going back to Florida to gunnery school, and then I went to Texas, Hondo, Texas, and finished navigation school. I was a second lieutenant at 19. And then we went to Walla Walla, Washington, where they had weather like in Europe, and was a navigator on a B-24 bomber. Finally, though, we did low-altitude bombing. They sent us to Utah, Dugway, Utah, where the Marines and the Army was having difficulty with the Japanese in their caves and diggings into the mountains. So they sent 10 of us, 10 B-24s, to Dugway, Utah, to develop low-altitude bombing with delayed action, high-penetration bombs to try to get those Japanese out. And even though we were trained for high-altitude bombing, we were now a low-altitude bombing group. So now they send us to the Atlantic. I flew the Atlantic at night with a black B-24, 500 feet, looking for German submarines. So that was my military career.
How long did that last?
Oh, that lasted until the war ended in Japan. We were looking for German submarines. Even though Germany had surrendered, we were still looking for German submarines that might be close to the United States. So then came the atomic bomb, and that ended all the activity.
Did you come back to Louisville then?
Yeah, right. I was discharged at Lowry Field. It was Lowry Field in Denver.
Yeah.
In November of 1945. Started Colorado U in 1946, March.
What did you study?
Studied engineering, physics, and finished that in 3 years. Got a Bachelor of Science degrees with honors from University of Colorado in 3 years, 49. Then I went to work at the Ames Aeronautical Laboratory in Moffett Field, California, Sunnyvale, 35 miles south of San Francisco, before getting back to Louisville again to work for the Bureau of Standards in Boulder.
And how, when you came back, did you move to Louisville? Or
I lived in Louisville for a while, yes. Then finally got married to Margaret Horgan. She was from Butte, Montana.
How did you meet her?
Through the Catholic Club in Denver.
And were you dancing? Was she dancing?
No, we didn't dance very much at that time, for some strange reason. But we had, you know, things in common, special interests and all. So, yeah.
So you were an only child.
Oh, yeah.
You had, what, 2 children?
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah, Mary Lee and my son Vernon. He's a medical doctor. He's a radiologist. And Mary Lee married Dr. James Overwetter, Dr. James Overwetter, and he's a endocrinologist. Well, I guess I should tell you I'm only a third of a doctor, but I won't tell you which third. I completed at least a third of a program for a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Colorado, but didn't finish it.
When did that come about?
After some further travels, after I was here in Louisville, I left. I married Margaret, and she said, well, we should do something else besides do research. So we got into big business. I went back to Chicago, putting elevators and big buildings in the big cities. And then they transferred me back to San Francisco, where I was a West Coast manager for the Charles W. Lurch Consulting Company in elevators. But then came Sputnik, and I went to work for Lockheed on the Polaris missile in Sunnyvale, California. And I was a ground test supervisor for the Polaris missile.
You had quite a variety
Right.
of career.
Yeah, and then finally finished Stanford. I started Stanford in 1949, and with all the interruptions coming back here, I finally finished and got a master's degree from Stanford University in 1962.
And what was that? What was the
Engineering science was what that was in. So still engineering. Then I went to work for Motorola down in Phoenix. See, I've been all over now. Went to work for Motorola in Phoenix, and there I worked on Army battlefield communications and Marine Corps, Navy amphibious warfare communications.
That would have been during the Cold War?
Well, that was in 1960, in 1963, 65. That's right, yeah. So then after that, we came back to California, worked for Philco Corporation. And then they asked me to be their representative at the Boeing Company in Seattle. So I had a long commute going back and forth to Seattle from Palo Alto, California. Then finally got back here to Boulder and worked for NOAA and worked on the hurricane planes. The airplanes go right on hurricanes down to Keister Air Force Base in Mississippi. And finally retired from NOAA.
So you lost your first wife then when your children were pretty young?
Yeah, my wife passed away in 1976. Mary Lee was 12, Vern was 17. And that was 1976, and then I was single for a long time. Then the Lord sent Loretta here, and I met Loretta. And I asked her if she liked to dance. I met her at a singles club, and I asked her to dance. I said, I love your eyes. She said she loved to dance, and we began dancing.
And that was the new beginning.
It was, really and truly. Yeah.
And you've been dancing ever since?
That's right, yeah. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your dancing and ballroom dancing. And,
Well, we belong to a dance exhibition group in Denver for quite a while, and danced at various places, retirement homes, and various events that occurred. Then the Society for Creative Aging put on shows every November, and we did dances for that. And the first one we did was Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers number, and Loretta came out. She looked more like Ginger Rogers than Ginger Rogers did. So every year we
brought a laugh from her.
so so every year we danced with them for a while. We danced at the Boulder Library and also the dairy that they have in Boulder. And then of course we put on our own exhibitions. We danced at the Senior Center, put on an hour show at the Senior Center. Cruise Night it was called. And then we had another hour show there, Dancing with the Stars of Yesteryear. And I did a tap dance like Gene Kelly. Yeah, like Gene Kelly, just like Gene Kelly. Yeah.
Gene Kelly a lot, yeah.
Singing in the rain, had the
Sorry,
umbrella.
I missed yours.
Had the umbrella, and guess what? I didn't have the umbrella high enough at one time, and it came down, and one of those spines raked my forehead, and I had blood streaming down my face, but I kept tap dancing.
And you were dancing. I hope someone had some pictures.
Well, I don't think we do that. We do have pictures of Loretta though, and Loretta would play the piano, and so she was a big part of it. One time she came out as Liberata, not Liberace, but Liberata, and we had to sound like a helicopter on cruise night. And she came out and she said backwards to the piano and played the piano.
Wow.
And then she turned around and the piano kept playing. So.
And Loretta's also an artist, right?
Oh yeah, she's an artist. She has wonderful art. So, yeah.
And you had a house built to your specifications, or how did you get I want to talk about the ballroom downstairs.
Oh, well, we bought this house. It was standing already, but then it's true. Loretta designed a lot of areas for it, and we got a place to put her ball gowns and her shoes, and we got a dance floor downstairs, and she decorated the dance floor with all the lights and the mirrors and everything like that. We have a place downstairs for her art studio, and a place for me to work at a desk. So it's really quite wonderful what she did down there. She doesn't only paint artwork, but she painted the floor of the basement down there, and she paints this house. You can't believe it what she does.
Do you ever have other dancers come and use the ballroom with you, or is it mostly,
No, we don't.
Rehearsing and
No, we don't. We just dance with the other dancers. Who? What? Oh, we've all right. We have had guests down there. That's true. I just didn't remember.
some dance nights once in a while. Huh?
I suppose so. Yeah, right. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So change the subject a bit and go back. I want to know. You have had a lot of nicknames in the past.
Yeah.
And tell us some of them, and how did you get them?
Well, Vernon. So then that would be V. They'd say, "Hey, V," you know. And then I had a nickname called Zooks. I don't know how I ever got that. I think maybe Long Jack gave that one to me, or George Toney, our town clown. And then Zucker. And if I did good, I was Zuckerman, you know. But Zuckerman.
And then Thunder you got
Oh,
later
yeah,
because of your work
with Noah,
planes
and changing the weather and being in weather modification. That's right.
Did you ever fly one of the planes, or
Oh yeah,
into the weather?
No, not into the hurricanes. My system flew into hurricanes, and we had completed the system and tried it out at Keesler Air Force Base. We went to Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, and tested against their radars. We had 3 airplanes in formation there at Cape Kennedy, big 4-engine turboprops. And then, fortunately, this is kind of interesting. Loretta visited the Gulf Coast with me, and before her Katrina, she saw that beautiful Mississippi coast. She saw Keesler Air Force Base, and we were going into Keesler Air Force Base with a full Air Force colonel, and Loretta did not have her ID. And guards came running up and they pointed a machine gun at Loretta because she looked like a terrorist.
Yeah, right.
And we did get her her ID, and we got into Keesler, went to the flight line, and I got Loretta into the big C-130 that flies into hurricanes, put her in the pilot's seat, and the regular pilot said, "I hope she's not like Howard Hughes. I hope she doesn't take this baby off."
So you sort of were visiting places that you had worked.
Oh, at that time, yes, right, yeah.
So when did you get the nickname Thunder?
Well,
Who gave it to you?
oh my Lord, should I tell him that, Loretta? No, she said no.
No.
Just to say
That you've been Thunder for a
I've
long
been
time.
Thunder, yeah. So,
What about some of your friends? Did Joe Kalachi have a nickname?
oh, I don't remember that he did, no.
Where did Long Jack get his?
Well, there are different stories on Long Jack, but the one I remember, that Long Jack kind of disputed this, but seemed to me like he was hunting with George Toney, and Long Jack shot a jackrabbit and only wounded him, and the jackrabbit was running away. So instead of shooting the jackrabbit again like you ordinarily would do, Long Jack started running him down. So he's jumping over the cactus and all, and George Toney looked at him and says, "Look at that Long Jack go." So
That's a good story. Anyway.
so it might be true, but
Yeah.
that's the story I've heard.
What are some of the other people, your friends, that had nicknames?
Oh, let me think. We had really a neat fellow named Frank DiGiovanardo, good Italian guy. His hair was always slicked back, never out of place. His name was Shampoo. And then we had another fellow with great hair slicked back, but kind of sticking out a little bit. We called him Wings. Then there was a fellow named Spook. Then there was Squeak. And who else? Maybe there'll be more coming, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, then there was Peggy. The fellow had a peg leg. A fellow named Happy. Then Peggy's brother was called Rats. Then there was one fellow that didn't have very good clothes, and he called him Rags. So we had quite a few nicknames.
Where did the rats come from?
I really don't know. He looked like a rat, I guess. Because he did. That's right. So
it was just typical to give people nicknames.
oh, yeah, everybody had a nickname. That's true. Yeah. And then John Franchini was Musty, and I don't know where that came from. So.
When you were going to school, this St. Louis was at the same place it is now.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where the basement was dug and
Yeah.
things there.
Yeah. That's right.
Did you play with the kids on the other side of the fence, or because the ones that went to the public school?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. But before the church was there, you know, the Catholic church, my dad helped build the Catholic church. All the men helped build the Catholic church there. There wasn't anything there. And the Red Men Hall was across the street from the church. And the public school kids would be going up to high school right along that where the Red Men Hall was, and we'd enter into snowball fights with the cats and the pubs. So we call them pups, I guess, but the cats were the Catholics, and the pubs were the public school kids.
So were both the Zurichs and the BLS Catholic?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
That was when the high school was over on McKinley or Garfield.
That's right, sure.
Yeah.
And I went to high school there for just a few months,
Oh, really?
my freshman year, and then we went up to the regular high school
What
on
is now
Main
the
Street.
middle school.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
But you actually started in
Yeah,
the old
yeah,
school.
yeah. Well, you know, since you're talking about the Catholic Church, we were servers there, and we had to learn Latin in about the 3rd grade or 5th grade, something like that. I still remember some of the Latin, Deum que lotificat juventutem meam quietus est fortitudo mea, and all that, you know. And we were servers, and if there was a funeral, why we'd have the mass, black candles, everything was black, a black shroud over the casket, and the priest wore black.
Everyone wore black.
Oh, it was a sad affair, and it was a dirge. And then after the mass, the priest would go home and have breakfast. Well, we'd get into the wine in the sacristy. And then the Henning, who was the mortician, would take us down the big hill going down to South Boulder Road. And we got to the cemetery, and I was a sacristan, and I had to lead the way to the grave, carrying the cross.
This was after you got in the wine?
Yeah, after we got into the wine, I couldn't find the grave. So after going around the cemetery a time, the mortician finally said, over here, over here.
But that was just something at the funerals that you would...
Yeah, I remember that, so yeah.
Were you a teenager then?
Well, no, we were still in grade school. Yeah. We knew about wine, though.
How, your mother, she lived with you for a while? Or?
Before we go into that, let me tell you one more thing about the wine.
Yeah.
My first time I served went like this. When it comes to time for the consecration and all, the priest would hold the wine up, his chalice up, and we'd pour the wine in, and the signal was when he raised the chalice to quit pouring. Well, there I am pouring. He raised the chalice up, I kept pouring. He raised the chalice up, I kept pouring. He raised the chalice up, I kept pouring. Well, guess what? I was on for every Sunday after that.
I thought you were going to get disciplined.
Well, so did I.
But instead you...
yeah, I was...
They liked the way you were doing it.
That's right.
That's a good story, Sarah Vernon. Did you, since you were an only child, did that have anything to do with you, like taking up tap dancing and some of the, things that if you didn't have brothers and sisters to play with at the time, you found sort of your own?
Oh, yeah, because my mother and father really encouraged me, and they said, you're not going to be a coal miner. You do good in school and go to Colorado. I did get a scholarship to Colorado U from high school, but I used the GI Bill. But they said, you want to, and we had good encouragement also from Frank Fabrizio, our principal, to go to college. So that was always on the agenda for that, yeah.
Was your mother a homemaker? Did she work?
Oh, she worked at Conn's Ready to Wear in Boulder for a while during the war and afterwards and all. Oh, during the war she worked also at the Remington Arms ammunition factory in Denver. So did my Aunt Ines. And guess what? My father was during the summer, went to work there at Remington Arms and some of the other coal miners, but they didn't last very long. You wonder why?
Why?
They couldn't stand a woman boss.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah. So they just were there a very short time, and the women were running it, and they couldn't take that.
So what did your father do? Then he go back to coal mining, or?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, and during the summer they had to do other things. He worked at the packing house in Denver, and so did my Uncle Tom and Johnny. But they really couldn't stand that slaughtering the cattle and things. They didn't last very long there. They worked at Fairmount Cemetery in Denver. Long commute, as far as I know. But then Dow Chemical came here and saved all the miners because all the mines closed down in about the 50s or 60s. And all the miners went to work for Dow Chemical, and my dad went to work for Dow Chemical at Rocky Flats. And he really liked it there.
And he retired
From Rocky Flats, that's correct. He retired.
Your mother, didn't she work at Brooks Faber also?
Yeah, that's right. Brooks Faber also. That's true.
Well, I shopped at those places years ago.
You
so-
did?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Kahn, and then there was Freddie and Dr. Kahn out there. So, yeah.
I have a coat I'm wearing from Conn's.
Is that right? Mr. Kahn was kind of a taskmaster, I think, because he'd tell the ladies,
Yes.
be sure and sell some, don't let them go out without them buying anything.
I've heard those stories.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And your mother was she active in the Democratic Party?
Oh, yeah, she was a chairman, what was it, Democratic Party chairman for the county, I believe, or here anyway. She was the chairman and went to some of the conventions and things like that. Yeah.
So you got some of your spunk from her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What do you do in retirement now?
Well, before we do that, let me just tell you that when my wife passed away back in '76, my mother moved in right in with me in my home there and helped raise my children and all. So my father was gone then. And then finally she couldn't go up and down the stairs, so she went to Golden West in Boulder,
Yes.
and she's stayed there for quite a number of years. But it's interesting because when she was moving in, she was considering moving in, she was talking to different people there if they liked the place, and she said to one lady, how long have you been here? And the lady said 21 years, and my mother said, do you like it?
So how long was your mother there?
Well, about 10 years, I think, yeah. So, yeah.
Do you still have a lot of friends in the area that high school buddies or, you know?
Well, you know, they keep going away. John Franchini went, Dick Franchini, Ed Hester, Long Jack went. So there aren't many left. I think there's Jack Misaki, a Japanese boy, left. Oh, a couple of Japanese girls have passed away. Alice Vara has passed away. I don't know. Betty Steinball, I don't know about her. But there are only very few left. John Mayhofer is the only one I can think of, and Jack Miyazaki right now.
Miyazaki was in your class?
Oh, yeah. We had some of the Japanese people that...
Was,
Yeah. And you know, even though we had a war with Japan going on, we never had any animosity toward the Japanese people.
And they didn't have to...
No, they stayed right here. They stayed right here because they weren't on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
That was the whole criterion, get the people away from the West Coast. Yeah. We had 2 Japanese girls and 2 Japanese boys in our class, and then there was another Japanese boy in the class ahead of us. And some of them played football even with us there.
They were farmers?
They were farmers out of Davidson. Yeah, right. They were out there with. We would go out and we'd go out and pick tomatoes ourselves for, you know, bring home a bushel of tomatoes from the Japanese folks.
Did your families have gardens and things too?
Oh, everybody did, yeah, in
Victory
particular.
gardens?
Well, I suppose, and they had rationing, and all the miners would carpool, and they'd save their gasoline. Everybody had gasoline, you know, stamps for everything, gasoline and all, and they'd save all their gasoline stamps, and then they'd pool all their gasoline stamps, and guess what? So they could go fishing once in a while.
I see. So they could have a little fun.
Yeah, right.
Did you have a car when you were?
No, we didn't have a car. My dad had a Model T at one time, and he sold it for $50 to Russell de Lerma, but we didn't have a car during all those years. And finally in '49, there weren't any cars even available after the war for quite a while. In '49, we finally got a car here, a Ford. So, incidentally, the airplanes that I flew on, the B-24s, were built by Ford in Willow Run, Michigan.
Oh,
Yeah.
they just turned the plant into.
Yeah, boy, they could really put out, see, there was mass production, and they knew how. Detroit knew how to make mass production with those cars, and Ford built our B-24s.
I heard that the auto plants,
Yeah.
that they just shut down the auto making and said you're going to do.
That's all there was.
That really
Chrysler built tanks.
worked within a year or two. They had all the planes built.
Oh, everything. Yeah, they really did things, wonderful things in a hurry. Chrysler built tanks, and American Motors built the Jeep, and so there were other motor companies that built other things.
So how are you feeling about living back close to Louisville but not in Louisville? Do you go to Louisville and look at some of the old places, or?
Well, every time I go by Louisville, I remember who lived here and there, and I tell that to Loretta as we drive along and things like that. We go to the Blue Parrot every so often, you know, and we see Joan Riggins every once in a while, you know. Yeah, I don't see very many people there anymore. And I see June Enrieto every so often. Lawrence was in our class too, Lawrence Enrieto, if you knew him. So, and she lives on Lafarge Avenue on the corner there still. That was her grandparents' home, the Girazelli's home.
I
So,
see.
yeah.
So most of your family was in that area, Lafarge and Grant and.
Yes, and then the Zurichs were on the west side of town, way on the west side of town.
Okay.
That was where all the people from Middle Europe were.
West side.
West.
I mean, not too far away, though. I mean,
Well, no, you know,
yeah,
the last street west,
yeah,
there was just farms in there. Whatever that street was, the last one to the west, and actually southwest corner is where they were. Yeah.
Did it stay pretty much depending on the nationality?
Yeah, I think so. Waschocks were there, and Zurichs were there, and the German was there. I remember that this German fellow went back to Germany and got a bride and came back, lived in this little house, and we went to Cheverium, but he never came out because he didn't. We were there with cans and all, giving him a Chevrolet, but he never came out. He was supposed to give us, you know, some kind of a treat, but he never came out. The German fellow.
Is that like a trick or treat, or I've heard the word, but I'm
yeah, it's like if you get married, you got cans with rocks in it. You go out there and shake all the rocks and make all kinds of noise, and then the groom is supposed to come out and give you a treat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was he? You think he was afraid to, or?
No, it was just he was a tough old German. So yeah. So that was
Did they do
our
that
thing.
for you when you got married?
No, that was gone away by that time I got married. But my mother did have a nice shower for my wife at Redmond Hall, also. Yeah.
I understand you had quite an 80th birthday, also.
Oh yes, Loretta did that, and she rented the Green Center at the School of Mines in Golden. Yeah, great big beautiful place, and we had a society band playing, and we had, how many people there, Loretta? 450?
Wow.
In tuxedos and long dresses and all, so it was really quite a formal affair. And Loretta decorated that place like you couldn't believe it. It almost looked like a jungle, because she had all kinds of trees decorated, and we had those dance statues that she made that we brought over. And we had to rent a truck to get over there with all the things we had. And we got it there all right. And then I had to back it up, and I couldn't back it up because I'm not too good a driver. She said, "Let me take that truck." And she did. She was the one that backed it up and got it out of there.
So were these all people that you had danced with?
They were all dancers from our dance clubs, and people we knew of us from our dancing all the time. They were all dancers.
Yeah.
That's who we invited, were the dancers, to enjoy it. Really wonderful band.
Scene.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That would have been great.
yeah.
So before we close this off, what do you have anything you want to say about your growing up here, or any predictions, or any suggestions you have for the young people in Louisville these days?
Well, I'm not sure, because the Louisville I knew is not the Louisville of today. And we only had 2,500 people, and we knew everybody. And it was a wonderful thing because everyone helped each other. And I'm not sure that everyone knows everyone anymore. And you walk along the street, everyone would say hello to you and how are you? And now you go there and I hardly know anyone, you know. So, but we knew everyone at that time, knew where they lived, knew their family history, and were always helpful. And of course, when there's a tragedy in the mines, the people always came by to assist the family. But I can't say much about Louisville today. And when Centaurus came, you know, Louisville kind of didn't have a high school for a while. So
Changing a bit then.
no, so from then on, I think it was different for me anyway. Yeah.
Did you ever go in the mines yourself?
Well, get ready for this. It turns out that when I was a kid, well, the way it used to be in Louisville, everybody had a party and people entertained themselves. So we were at one of the mine superintendent's home for a party on New Year's Eve. And somehow you always have some spirits around, you know. And as the evening progressed on New Year's Eve, somebody said, let's go down the mine. And everybody said, that's a good idea. So on New Year's Eve, we went out to the Centennial Mine, and the engineer who runs the hoist happened to be in the party. So he took us down the mine, and then I got on the shaft, or the elevator that goes down. It goes down fast, I remember that. So we got down the mine, New Year's Eve, and I'm looking for the mules. They had generally had mule barns, you know. But I didn't see any mules down there at that time. But it was whitewashed, and there was a lot of room right down at the bottom of the shaft. Plenty of room, lots of room. I was surprised, lit up, everything like that. And a couple of things, they had women down there that went down the mine, and you don't take women down the mine. So all those miners said, oh my Lord, you took women down the mine. And then we saw some of the other things that were down there. We saw some of the machines that they used and the motor that pulls the coal cars. Now, do you know what a shoebox looks like? Well, get a great big shoebox, and that's what the motor looked like. The locomotive that pulled all the cars, and the motor man sat behind and drove this big shoebox, and that was what pulled all the cars. I was surprised to see that.
Fascinating, but you're probably happy you didn't work in the mines.
No, I did not work in the mines. But then, you know, somebody said when they brought the mules up during the summer or whatever, they were blind. But I don't know that that's true.
I've heard
But
that from other people.
yeah, or maybe they were just, you know, blinded by the sun for a while. Because another man said they had them working on the farms and all. But one of the guys says, oh yeah, we just put sunglasses on them and it worked okay. So anyway.
That sounds like a pretty good place to end.
Okay.
Sunglasses on the mules.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Vernon. It's been a great interview.
All right. So.
Okay, we're recording.
You're recording?
Vern, let's see you dance.
All right. We'll do Art and Linda for you.
Put your chin down.
Wait a minute. All right. Ready?
You don't need music?
And I like my dress.
I love to watch ballroom dancing.
And it's hard to dance without your shoes.
Oh, yes.
Because it's that heel
Yeah,
helps you turn.
yeah.
Plus
Okay.
shoes.
There